Alright, so today we're going to do a medium diced onion. We're going to be able to use these onions in our chili for tomorrow's game. We'll also be cutting bell peppers. I don't know if we'll be doing that probably first period tomorrow. We'll do a few of them if I want to try and do a little bit of a demo as well. So a medium dice, if you're looking at kind of your little graphic representation here, a medium dice is going to be this one right here, which is about a ½ inch by a ½ inch or so. Okay. Now these will not be like a perfect cube because onions are layered, just like Shrek, right? So they'll be somewhat flat. They'll actually be more like, these Paisan cuts, where they'll be like that ½ inch by ½ inch, but they won't be quite that thick. But we're still going to try to achieve as square a cut as we can get. Okay. So first of all, because the onion is, obviously grows in the ground, you have a root end here and a stem end. The root end a lot of times is going to have a little dirt. Like we watched that video the other day, the chef talked about that. And so, if you have a paper towel on your board, you can kind of avoid getting all that, that dirt or all the, those little roots all over your board and possibly mixing them with your onions. So we're going to go through the process of peeling this first. The first thing I'm going to do is take that off with my paring knife. Use your paring knife, and you don't want to take the core out because that core is going to help hold the onion together when we do our dices. But you do want to take kind of all that dirt and all that end off of there. Okay. And if in the process you can kind of get some of that peel, take some of that peel off of there as well, that'll make it easier down the road because you're going to have to eventually peel this whole thing anyway. Using your knife like you would kind of your fingernails, just grabbing pieces of that peel and bringing that down there. We'll have to take all that brown off as well, like this stuff right here. We'll do that when we cut the top of that off. You can't really use the peels for much of anything. You could put them in stock if you wanted to. You'll get some onion flavor out of there, but it's relatively bitter, so you don't want to use too much of them. Now this inner skin, this would be a little bit better for stock. It's not going to be as bitter as those peels are. You can see, like, I'm just grabbing the top of that. I'm taking that next layer off, and that's kind of where we'll stop for that. All right, that last little piece there. Okay, so there's our peeled onion. Okay, I'm going to set that off here to the side. Let me get rid of all my garbage. Discard that. Take and clean my board. Okay, so now we have this onion. Now remember, we had a root end and we had a stem end. The root end's got a nice kind of solid core to it, so that's going to kind of help hold our onion together when we go to cut this, because we don't want it flying apart and all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it straight down, right down the middle of that root, just like that. When you open that up, you'll see that root end is still in there. Okay, you can see all those layers of onion, just like that. And they'll all separate when we cut this. So now you want to have the root end away from you, because we're going to, that's probably the part that we're not going to use, when we get to that end, because it's really fibrous. It's not something we're going to, you could use it in stock, and it's pretty good for that, because it's not nearly as bitter as, say, the peels are or anything like that. It works really well for stock. So we're going to take that. Now, you want to address your onion kind of like you're going to cut. I'm going to cut like this at a 45-degree angle, so that onion with the stem end is facing me and the root end is away from me. Okay? And now, just like when we cut potatoes the other day, what we want to do is make whatever our cut needs to be, whatever our dice, that size, that dimension, that's what your slices need to be. Because think of those like slices and then dices when you turn them. So if I want a ½ inch, then I'm going to make each slice a ½ inch apart. If I wanted a 1/4 inch, I'd make each slice a 1/4 inch apart, or even down to an 1/8 inch, whatever. However you want those dices, those end dices to be, that's how you want to cut that. Okay. So I'm going to start by and when I go here, I'm not going to cut all the way to the end, because I want to leave that core intact, because that's what's going to hold that onion together. Go straight down at a ½ inch. Okay. When you get here, you can see, like, I'm going to have to go in at an angle to do this. Right here. And then be careful about this part of it. Then we want to make our cross cuts. We want to make kind of a horizontal cut towards the bottom here, and not all the way in. And then another one right here. Okay. That's going to help break up those layers just a little bit. Okay, and now your onion's ready to cut. Now remember, at a 45-degree angle, we want to turn it just like that, so now we can begin cut. Use your fingers like a claw, and then just make those half-inch cross cuts. And you see that onion just falls apart. And when you get to this last one, depending on how far you cut into it, this right here can be used for stock, so we're going to keep that off to the side. And then this last cut, sometimes if you didn't cut all the way through it, these may be stuck together, so just make sure you check them. Okay? So that's kind of what you want to do with that. Okay? You take that, put them in our plate here. You can see that these cuts, if you break them up, see that cut is that kind of that half-inch size that we were looking for. Now it's flat because an onion has those layers, but it's nice and square for the most part. And for chili, that's a pretty decent cut. You wouldn't want it too much smaller than that or too much larger than that. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do those half-inch cuts, not going all the way through the back of my onion because I don't want it to fall apart. I'm going to turn it this way so that I can make my cross cuts horizontally, not going all the way through. You see I'm kind of holding my palm on here, but I'm keeping my fingers back away from that knife. And the knife itself is actually slightly angled down. Okay? And then our half-inch. Okay? And then keeping our end for stock. Okay? And then you just break those up. You can see we have those nice half-inch dices. So each of you is going to do one onion, and when I come around to take a look at it, all I'm going to check, I know that you're going to have some pieces that are a little small because you get to those little edges and those ends, but I want to have a general consistency of, that half-inch or so. When you pick those up, you can see that they're, fairly square, that you went about cutting that onion in the right way. Now, if we wanted to cut it really tiny, we would just made those cuts a little closer together, and when we turned it, we would have made that a little bit closer together. Okay?